Race.
Thank you. I've declared a conflict in this. I'm a member of the Squash Club and part of the same tax-paying entity. So there's an indirect financial.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, I will also be declaring a conflict as I'm a member of another club in the same circumstances.
Thank you. All right, I need a motion to adopt the TE. Moved by Councilor Herford, second by Councilor French. All those in favor, opposed, motion carries. All right, we have just 2 items are on our agenda today. First up is the budget discussion. So through staff, a survey is drawn out to the public prior to our budget deliberations. And so we're going to talk about the survey results. Over to you, Ms. Moore.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Christina Moore. I'm the Communications Manager for the district, and I'll take you through the pre-budget survey results that we have received. So just a little overview. We issued 7 questions to help Council understand citizen priorities for 2020. There were 3 objectives for this survey. One of them to try to convey the idea that trade-offs are necessary through the decision-making process, to understand, gain understanding of community priorities, to assist in council decision-making as you weigh those trade-offs, and then to encourage citizens to get involved early in the budget process. The survey was open from September 25th to October 15th, and we received 166 completed responses, which was significant for a budget survey, and we received 71 partial responses. So you'll see in some of the earlier questions a higher rate of response than that 166, and that dropped off a little bit as the survey went on, which is quite typical with survey completion. So I'll take you through the survey results by question, and we can either get through the whole presentation and then stop for questions and discussion, or feel free to ask questions of clarification as we go along, whatever you prefer. So the first question was to rank the strategic plan priority areas, and the idea behind this was to understand, of the 4 strategic plan priorities that Council had set out for the term, where the community placed value in terms of their own priorities. So the planet and our environment pillar was ranked first overall with a score of 528. It's a little hard to see the colors there, but you'll see the rank distribution on the right-hand side shows the highest number of number 1 ranks, and the colors on the left of that bar show the highest number of the lowest ranks. So as it balances out there, the score in the 3rd column shows where the pillar ended up in the overall ranking. So planet and our environment, number 1, economy and local jobs, housing affordability and diversity, and the neighborhood connectivity were all quite close, with a score of 452, 436, and 433. I will note there is a lot of information that we'll go through today, and so it will be available to you electronically to really dig in after the fact, after the presentation. The second question asked how citizens would allocate money to improve road safety for cyclists and pedestrians. And we gave 3 choices, either ranking, contributing money to enforcement, such as policing costs for speed control, for example, education, such as driver safety campaigns, or the built environment, such as sidewalks and bike lanes, or off-road cycling and walking paths. And you'll see here that the majority of citizens chose to invest the majority of the funds in the built environment to close to 60%, 58.2%. Enforcement coming in second at 25.7%, and driver safety campaigns. Public education coming in at 20%. The next question asked three different options for to gauge the level of support around increasing funds to support recreation facility improvements. We gave the community three options to increase funds with the express purpose of funding a new recreation center. And the feedback that we received on each option is presented on the next three slides. So the first option was an overall facility improvement tax that would appear on property taxes up to about 1%. We saw strong support of 30%, somewhat support of 26.4% for a total of 56.7% in the support category. Neutral was about 6.2%. Don't particularly support was 19.1%, and strongly don't support was 18%, with the do not support, strongly don't support adding up to 27.1%. The second option was for recreation facility membership fee, so up to $6 per person or $10 per family. This was identified as a one-time fee per year for a family or an individual. This received significant support, 55% strongly support, 20.8% somewhat support, for a total of 75.9% in the support category. Neutral was 11.8%, and then don't particularly support was 9.6%, and strongly do not support was 2.8%. And the third option was a recreation facility improvement fee that would be funded through an increase in user fees and rental rates up to 5%. In this category, for this option, strongly support was 39.5%, somewhat support was 23.7%, for a total of 72.2%. Neutral was a little higher in this category, 16.4%. Don't particularly support was 13%, and strongly do not support was 7.3%, for a total of 20.3% in the do not support category. So the next question asked citizens to rank service areas as to how they would prioritize funds for investment in 2020. Now, we listed 17 service areas. It wasn't possible or meant to be a comprehensive list of all services, but rather it represented a selection of areas that had been, that citizens had often inquired about higher levels of service over time. The goal was to gauge how citizens might prioritize some of these services. So again, on the right-hand side in the blue, you're seeing the options that received the highest rank, and then the pink on the left is balancing that out with where that particular service area received the lowest rank for a total score. This is the top 5 of the group. So active transportation came out on top, followed by affordable housing, followed by climate adaptation and mitigation. Fire rescue ranked quite high, and in comments, I'll get into comments a little bit later, but it was divided between a new fire hall facility and also a shift to more fire personnel versus volunteers seemed to be the theme. And local business growth and new business attraction came out quite high across the board as well, and I'll get into some of the comments a little bit more in future slides. The next set of ranking here from 6 to 12 went from recreation at rank 6, emergency planning and mitigation 7, transit regional service at 8, followed by local transit service at 9. Local businesses, resources and support, which was separate from the previous side, which was business attraction. And then policing and arts, culture and heritage. And then on the final few service areas here, we had bylaw enforcement, road paving, library services, snow removal, and traffic calming. Again, not a comprehensive list, but a list of areas that have come up frequently with public inquiries about higher levels of service. So then we moved into a section of the survey that was more open-ended, and we asked citizens if they could fund 3 things in 2020, what would those be? So we received 494 comments across the 3 choices, across the survey respondents. That represented almost about 90 different topic areas. So I've done my very best to group those and theme them, which I'll present over the next few slides. So the top areas to increase funding are as follows. Recreation got 59 mentions, and the majority of that were related to a new recreation center. Program and amenity improvements ranged from amenities or facilities such as tennis courts or improvements to fields, and then additional programs for youth, seniors, just general programs across the board. Active transportation received 52 mentions. Quite a number of those focused on sidewalks, bike lanes, trails. Those were the 3 primary ones, with a couple of mentions on safe routes to school and trailhead infrastructure, such as washrooms and garbage cans at trailheads. Affordable housing received 51 mentions, and of mentionable note was a number of the comments spoke specifically to a housing authority, and a number of the comments were themed along ensuring that affordability was available for seniors. Local jobs, 43 mentions, quite a number of those in business development and attraction to create new local jobs. Quite a number of the comments as well focused on retaining and supporting current businesses. Transit received 42 mentions, and you see the breakdown of regional comments or comments about creating innovative solutions for commuting to Vancouver for jobs, and 29 comments, and then local transit improvements, 13. The environment received 35 mentions on the topics of climate change and habitat green space protection. Arts and culture, including library, received 26 mentions, and a number of those were specifically about a new art space type theater that could house arts and culture. Fire halls and fire department again, 22 mentions spoke to a replacement of the tantalus fire hall or an increase in the funding for the department to support staffing and emergency response. Roads infrastructure received 21 mentions, really across a fairly broad gamut, from paving and potholes to intersection improvements and safety. Infrastructure for growth, 16 mentions, primarily around the pipes in the ground, sewer and water. Public spaces, ranging from downtown streetscapes and public gathering spaces to one mention about a commercial space in the Highlands, generally gathering spaces where neighbors and community members could gather. And then bylaw enforcement, 15 mentions suggested that we increase bylaw enforcement. Other notable mentions, policing received a number of comments. Some of the comments on policing spoke specifically about some of the drug challenges that have been identified at some of the schools. That was a concern. Flood protection and hazard mitigation due to climate change. Pedestrian overpasses, I pulled this out specifically versus including it in the road infrastructure. It was mentioned a number of times, in particular at the Cleveland entrance. And the Alice Lake intersection was also cited as a very concerning safety area. Camping and vehicle restrictions. A second entrance to downtown received a number of comments, in particular relating to the growth of and density of the downtown community as new development is opening up. Community grants, and then a half dozen or so mentions both of boat launch and airport improvements to the airport runway and infrastructure.
Just for clarity, is that camping and vehicle restrictions, people saying we shouldn't have them, or people saying we should?
This is in response to people requesting that we invest more in those restrictions. So in that case, the camping and vehicle restrictions would have been in relation to more restrictions.
And likewise for community grants, people are looking for more money.
Yes.
Sorry, that last slide, these were mentioned, not prompts, so we don't really have that much background as to what the solution, and I'm thinking in relation to the camping and vehicle restrictions, is this investment in the restrictions or in the solutions, which are the campgrounds and stuff, but we don't really have that.
We do have the breakdown. We can share. I can share all the comments, but in terms of the actual camping and vehicle restrictions, it ranged. There were a couple around enforcement of the restrictions that we put in place. There were a couple about safe lots and infrastructure and reasonable campgrounds. So we can definitely dig into that a little bit more to pull those out.
Thank you.
If there are particular topic areas that you want me to itemize after the fact, I can go back and surface those specifically. But that was about I think there were about 8 or so, 6 to 8 comments specifically on that topic, ranging on those areas. So the second part of this question was, if you could reduce funding in 3 areas in 2020, what would they be? And what I found through the analysis here was when I calculated the number of responses in the same topic areas, in some cases they were pretty close. So as many people wanted to increase funding as wanted to decrease funding. Community grants, to your comment, Councillor Pettingill, was one of those topics. There was quite a divide on the number of people who would like to see more and the number of people who would like to see less. So, areas to reduce funding. At the top here, not dissimilar to other budget and surveys, not dissimilar to other budget surveys and engagement, there is a perception that the district is too large, and so 26 mentions ranging from wages to benefits to potential for staff cuts were mentioned in that topic area. Quite a number of people spoke to the pace of development, so slowing down development received 20 mentions, and that was across the board from stop approving new developments, but also just to take stock of where we currently are and give the community a chance to catch up and potentially bring in some policy that could help to slow down development. Bike lanes and trails, that's one of the ones that also received a high mention on this side of things. There are a number of citizens who filled out the survey that felt that we had enough. And arts and culture, same thing. 18 mentions suggested that this was an area that we could reduce funding. Same with bylaw enforcement. A number of people felt that that wasn't necessary to fund to the degree that we currently do. Road maintenance, same thing. I think the theme around road maintenance was really about let's stop maintaining roads as a disincentive to people using single occupancy vehicles, parking, and an opportunity to try to move people out of, shift their habits over to more of an active transportation focus. The road maintenance piece was primarily around environmentally driven comments. Policing was another area. And then 10 mentions, 10 citizens actually did say don't reduce any areas, and we're prepared to accept tax increases to allow that to enable that to happen. And then recreation received 8 mentions of reduced funding, and that was across the board with some programming, some field support, and that type of comment. So a few other notables. Parking did come up a few times. 7 mentions to preserve parking and 4 mentions to reduce funding for parking. And that was the sort of intention behind those reducing funding for parking was similar to the environmental idea of shifting people out of cars and moving them into more active transportation modes. Traffic calming saw 5 mentions in support and 7 mentions not in support. A use of consultants was also mentioned, as well as the landscaping and gardening as an area that could potentially be reduced. So we're getting into pretty small numbers of mentions here, but they were notable. I should mention too, sorry to overuse the word mention, in the areas to reduce funding, we had a much fewer responses. So as I had indicated, we had 494 responses in the what could you fund category, and we had 221 comments in the what would you reduce category. So we had about half the ideas for reducing as we did for increasing. The final question on the survey was, do you have any additional comments? And many of the comments were reiterated that we have just heard in terms of the themes. Several ones that were notable that I felt hadn't been reflected in the presentation so far were just on the topic of responsible budgeting, core service review and focus, ensuring that the district maintains its focus on what its core services are. In particular, in relating to long-term residents with high taxes who have high taxes now due to their appreciating property values and the issue of affordability across the board. A number of people were very appreciative of the survey and the opportunity to comment, and one quote I just added in here, one person appreciated the fact that this is a complex budget with difficult choices and trade-offs, so they appreciated that we did get that through to at least one person. Several mentions around developers and ensuring that they are invited or asked to pay for facilities like recreation centers. That was in addition to development cost charges. The people who did mention this did reference development cost charges as well, so there was the intention, the expectation that they were different. And then several mentions just on the theme of areas that were perhaps outside of our jurisdiction around healthcare, schools. But I did want to mention a few comments around daycares, availability of daycares. In particular, one comment about daycare rents and whether there was opportunity for rental controls or subsidies for daycares, and then social services. So in terms of our next steps for public engagement, the home of the 2020 budget process will be at squamish.ca/budget. We will post these results and comments online. As I mentioned, it's a lot to go through, and I want to ensure that we're transparent with the feedback. And then once council does begin the discussion around the budgets, as we always do, we'll have all the budget spreadsheets available on our website for people to really dive into. And then we have, the last couple of years, we have created an interactive tool that will let people click through the budget areas to help them understand where the focus and priority projects are for 2020. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to try to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councilor French.
Thank you. The slide that talked about recreation fee of $6 to $10. Maybe I just gapped it there momentarily. Is there a time frame associated with that? Like, I'm not really clear how that would work.
That would be an annual fee. So it would be like a membership fee. So when you sign up for a new program or you purchase a multi-day pass, a 10-time pass, for example, you would pay a one-time membership fee for that year. And then the following year, so that would be regardless of the number of programs you were to sign up for. So if you signed up for one program, you'd pay $10. If you signed up for 12 programs, you'd still sign up for $10. You still pay $10 for your family. And then it would be charged annually.
Councilor Pengil, then Councilor Anderson.
Just in relation to that actual question, do we have anything about the demographics of the people responding? And with this particular question, it struck me that, you know, if you have a lower income level, a property tax base like 1% might make more sense, whereas if you do fairly well financially, the family fee is maybe cheaper. And so I wonder if there's something at play there, or if we have that data.
This survey didn't ask for demographic data. I think moving forward, we could dig into that a little bit more. I think the idea around this survey was really to just get a high level sort of temperature check, but we could, that could be something that we could dig into a little further in the future.
Councilor Anderson?
Inviting public input into the budget is something that's evolved from year to year. This year, our schedule for that input, or for our budget process, will also be changed. Looking ahead, do you already have an idea, or will you be seeking direction from council as to next steps of budget input, for example, a meeting or a public meeting? And I just recall that one of the things we changed last time was to host a meeting at the Ledge that was not only a budget input, but also input into our strategic plan. So we do different things each year, as I've observed over the years. But will we be revisiting the discussion, a discussion on future plans for public input, or do you have it?
Through you, Chair. You're absolutely correct. It has evolved each year, and it has generally been with council's input and direction and ideas. So it's an open conversation. The Ledge meeting last year worked quite well. We received great feedback from yourselves who had attended, and also the participants, the citizens who had attended. So every year has been we've consistently had an information meeting. The format of that meeting is absolutely up for discussion. The idea behind this pre-survey was to really get ahead of the budget conversations so that we could actually use the survey input to help guide the decision making. We wanted to ensure that we had an understanding of the priorities before it appeared to be, sort of later in the process, and make sure that we have more authentic engagement. So we are as the budget process continues, I think our focus will really be on education and trying to build awareness within the community as to what is included in the budget, and then looking ahead to the public information meeting at the end to do another check-in.
Thank you.
Councilor Bingo, and then Councilor Hearn.
Do you have a sense from the data at this point whether people might be grouped into a fund everything group and a cut everything group, or on an individual basis where was it more people were fund this and not that, and so there's some sort of internal balancing on an individual basis?
That's a good question. I didn't get a sense. I mean, there were some obvious themes that I could almost tell were the same person, sort of ensuring that their point got across. Some people were very specific in their points. We can correlate. Each response is numbered to a respondent, so we could look back and dig in a little deeper to how certain people responded to the fund question versus the not fund question. But generally, I didn't really see any themes that jumped out at me or any patterns that jumped out at me. As I say, the funding question covered so many topic areas, well over kind of 85 to 90. And so grouping them and trying to present them in a way that provided some themes was challenging with so many comments. And we have all the comments available as well that you can kind of get a sense of how broad-based they are.
Councilor Herford?
Thank you. I suppose just really a thank you for this work. I think that it really shows to me that there's the whole community's grappling with this perception of affordability, and I think this point, and as Councillor Pettigill pointed out, really changes depending on where you are in your own sort of personal situation, and each really option just sort of captures a different piece of affordability, and I think that really speaks to the complexity of the trade-offs. And I was really interested to see that, what would you like to see funded more, and what has to be there is that balance of what would you like to turn down, and is very telling. And I think we do have some hard choices ahead, and I think that this is a start to really help inform that discussion. So thank you. It's really enlightening.
So my question is, has this been shared with our budget managers? So where does it go from here? I mean, we've seen it, but obviously, how does it inform the budget process going forward?
Do we want someone else to help me with that question? So it has been shared with our core leadership team, and sounds like Ms. Matthews can speak to where they're at with their process at this point.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. I'm not sure I can provide a lot more. We just basically got these results, so yes, they will be shared, and they have been shared with all of our core leadership team. We have done some preliminary and fairly extensive reviews of the budget at the core leadership team at this point. We're meeting again this Thursday, and we'll look at that as part of that context.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Great.
I really enjoyed having this done prior to going into budget, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that the 4 priorities that we have up on the wall are aligned very much with what the community is thinking. So that was heartening to see.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, so next up we have the 2020 to 2024 Squamish-Lillooet Regional District Financial Plan Submission on the Aquatic Center. And Mr. Russell is here to walk us through that. And I can't remember if this the new counselors were part of this discussion last year, or whether it would have taken place around the same time. So I don't know whether this is just-in-time learning. And do the new counselors, do you understand this part of the submission? Did we talk about last year? Maybe a little refresher then, before we get into the details.
Sure, happy to do that. Thank you, Mayor Elliott, for pointing that out. Of course, this would have come through last year in around early October, so you're right, we didn't. And admittedly, I don't know that we prepared a huge amount of just-in-time learning, but I think it's fair to say that the Aquatic Center is actually funded and managed, or funded through the SLRD. And every year, about this time of year, we are required to provide a submission to the SLRD requesting budget and requisition to continue to operate the pool, which we do on their behalf. So this service is established service up in the SLRD, and it is shared between Squamish and Area D. And not sure if there's much more context I can provide other than, like I said, we basically own and operate the pool, or operate the pool, not own, operate the pool under our recreation service areas. So we make that distinction, split out the two facilities and portion costs.
Is there any advantage to carrying on with that scheme? I mean, I don't know the exact history of it. I think it was the early 90s when the pool was built. And have we paid off the debt, for example? Is it something we should take over? Do we have to go through the SLRD?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, Mayor Elliott. Ms. LaFrance and I did discuss this again this summer. And the outcome of that conversation was that she was going to go back and review this a little bit more in terms of whether there's an opportunity now to transition the Aquatic Center back to us and what that would look like in terms of cost sharing with Area D going forward. So that's back in her court right now. I believe, my understanding is that she's also been going through some capacity issues on her end. So I have touched base with her again, but I haven't heard back this week just to confirm where she's at with that. Either way, it will not be in place for 2020, as I'm sure as directors of SLRD, you're very aware that rejigging the establishing servicing bylaws does take some time, and there will need to be careful consideration of how assets transfer back and how costing is dealt with either through a new establishing service for Area D or some other potential contribution, or we would need to consider what that looks like if we were to take on those costs from a municipal perspective. So discussions have begun, but we're not far enough along to impact 2020, so hence why we're back.
All right. Do you have a presentation, or?
I think I'll hand it over
Yeah,
to Mr. Russell, if that's fine, and he can just go through some highlights.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Thank you, Christine, for explanation of how all this works. I too was not here this time last year to be prepped on all this, so this is good news for me too. As our CFO outlined, this is a relatively straightforward agreement that we have with the RD. Annually, we prepare a budget, which we bring to you as part of council report and ask you for permission to submit that budget document and request to the SLRD. That is why we are here today. The changes that, what we are requesting this year is a total of $1.4 million. That is a slight increase over last year's request. Last year's request was basically $1.37 million, so about $50,000 change increase year over year. That works out to a 4.2, numbers going in the right order here, a 4.2% increase in our total requisition from 2019 to 2020. We think that given the overall services that are provided and the general increases in cost, age of the building, the amount of maintenance that is required, and the ongoing operations of the facility, that an increase of that amount or that nature is reasonable and appropriate. And we are asking for your blessing to provide this information forward to the SLRD for their consideration.
Thank you.
And sorry,
sorry,
Mayor
Ms.
Elliott, I'm sorry, in my just-in-time learning, I probably didn't make clear that this, we bring it to council so that particularly our directors also are aware of what's going to be put forward. The actual decision around this budget itself will be made at the SLRD table, just for clarification.
All right, any questions on the report? Councillor Paglia.
So we're asking that this essentially go into the SLRD budget. They will, if they agree, we'll do a tax requisition. So Area D and Squamish residents would somehow end up paying that with other areas, or it's just Area D and Squamish?
Through the mayor, the establishing bylaw right now just apportions requisition to those two areas right now.
I have a question. In the report, it talks about the 2-year phase project to replace the roof on the Aquatic Center, which is a project a little bit further out, but it says this project will be coordinated with other major renovation work taking place at Brennan Park. And I was wondering what that was referring to. And you'll need to come up to
Hi. My name is Camilla Say, Facilities Manager. It would be in conjunction with any of the rooftop units. Right now we have one slated for replacement next year, but it might be that we'll push that out to the following year with the roof replacement too. So those two would be the two major projects. If there was any other renovation work that would come up between now and then from a grant or otherwise, then we would do it at the same time.
anything else? Right, so the motion is that we approve the 2020 to 2024 local service area budget request. The submission to the SLRD by Council Race, seconded by Council French. Any comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to close, moved by Councilor Bird, seconded by Councilor Pettigo. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.